What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. Today I have the one and only Adam Sutherland on from Frag Garage. How the heck are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me here.
Excellent.
It's nice to be a couple reef dudes and have a beer and just talk about reefing. It's awesome.
Cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers.
All right. So if any of you haven't seen before, Adam is the master of growing coral. And if you take a look at his website, fraggarage.ca, there is a bazillion nice corals on there and everything looks absolutely phenomenal. All the corals in the background that's kind of fading through today are all just pics from his tank. So he definitely has it down. You're kind of a master of the acro. So this should be a good one today.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. So I guess just for starting, how long have you been in reefing?
Probably since about 2000. So about 22 years now.
Oh, that's pretty solid.
It's crazy to think about how much the hobby has changed over the years, and I've always had a tank. I mean, some people have taken a break from the hobby, but I've always had something running, even when it wasn't at the place I was living at. It's like I always had something running.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I can say that there's probably live rock in my systems that's from my first ever tank.
That's
awesome. kind of sentimental,
That's true.
Yeah. So, I've kind of weaved in and out of the hobby over the years, but the past sort of 5 or 6, I've been really serious about it and just grew too much coral and decided to set up a business as a side hustle. And then this just kind of grew, and COVID actually really helped me out as far as having this as a business, because everybody was at home messing around with their tanks, delving into new hobbies, stuff like that. So
nice.
Ever since, it's been pretty solid for me. So yeah.
That's wicked.
To this place, this facility, and I got about 500 square feet in my garage at my house. So it's still in a garage. So the name still makes sense.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Staying true to the name. You'll just need like a really big garage one day if you ever expand, just to keep it legit.
It's just always has to be a garage, just a bigger garage.
Yeah, like an automotive garage or something, just to like keep the name legit.
Totally. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So how long has it been when you went from like hobbyist to like a business in a sense?
It's hard to say. It was probably around 2014 or 15. I've always sold a little bit of coral on the side because you kind of have to, right? But that's just kind of like, just little extra little cash on the weekends here and there. But I set it up as a business initially just to sort of write off expenses for my hobby. Like, it wasn't really a serious thing. Like, I'm a music producer, I'm a musician. Like, that's my background.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
I just kind of, I guess, probably got a little more serious about it about 4 years ago, and having a website has really helped. Sort of solidifies your pricing and stuff like that. So, and then just sort of expanding and having more space has allowed me to import more stuff and experiment a little bit more between different systems too, because I have 3 separate systems, and it's interesting to see what does better in different tanks. And, things like zoanthids, I usually put, as soon as I have more than one head that I can frag, I'll put one in 2 different tanks, because we know they melt sometimes. So it's nice to, there's lots of times I've regretted not having a backup, and it's like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just like one day that, GMK just goes, and it's like you lose the whole colony. There's nothing you can do about it. So
been there.
Have a backup.
It's my most expensive Zoa that's melted on me.
Yeah, it hurts.
Macy's Daddy, what's his website again? It is in the description. So fraggarage.ca. Definitely check it out. Okay, and one note, your pictures are wicked. You do a phenomenal job with your photography. I love that part.
Yeah, I enjoy it, actually. It is like, it's kind of the creative aspect of the hobby that I enjoy. And I use a Olympus TG5. I guess it's the TG6, which is maybe a little newer version of it. But once you sort of get the feel for the white balance, it's a great camera, because you can just stick it underwater and take pictures from any angle.
I have the TG4. It's a good one.
Yeah, and I have to do a little bit of editing afterwards, but I try my best to, make the pictures as accurate as I can. And people tend to tell me that they think when they actually come here that my corals look like they do on the website, which is kind of all I could ask for, really. So, so I try.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. I will paste the website in the chat for you. Boot. There you go. Okay, so I guess a couple big questions. Well, actually, one question I had initially when you're talking, like when you move frags from different systems, do you notice a big change from system? And do you think it's more from lighting or parameters, or like, do you notice any big differences from tank to tank?
Yeah, I mean, nothing tends to change very fast, And it kind of makes me realize it's like, we talk about not doing anything too fast in this hobby, but like when you take a frag from another person's system, like without a doubt, you're changing the chemistry a lot. You know, sure, you might have similar salinity, alkalinity, whatever, but you know, all those microelements and stuff, like there's so many factors. So, and I do find that like corals tend to be fine in my other systems, or, you know, like otherwise, like, you know, people that buy coral would be losing stuff all the time too. So, yeah, but no, those changes don't tend to happen really quickly, but it's definitely interesting to see, you know, how things change. And I collaborate with the local fish store called Blue World Aquariums, and I keep a frag tank there and a display there. So I sort of have the best of both worlds, where I have a home-based business and then kind of a retail side.
Oh,
locally,
that's a cool way to do it.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Okay, so first question is going to throw out there, because I know I get asked 20 times in the stream. What do you do parameter-wise? Where do you keep your tanks at?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with the basic 3. So obviously, like alkalinity, 8 to 8.5. I kind of shoot for 8.3, you know, if I'm going to get really specific, just because I don't really want it to get much higher than that if there is a little bit of a swing. And I mean, with the volume of coral, like actual biomass in my systems, it's like things can change really quickly. If there's some little, you know, just anything, it's just like I use a CO2 scrubber on my protein skimmer, and if I turn off my protein skimmer for a few hours one day, that's actually a big difference in growth by having the pH suppressed a little bit, you know, and it's magnified over a system that's full of coral. Like the amount of actual polyps and growing tips, it's like, you know, it's a lot. So things can change fast. So anyways, that was a bit of a long answer to alkalinity, but yeah. But I've definitely found the best around in the sort of low to mid 8s, 8.2, 8.3. Okay. Nice. Yeah. And calcium, I find things don't seem to do as well when my calcium gets much over 450. I really think for 440 to 430 to 440. I don't know why. I think it probably every system is a little different, but probably has a little to do with, you know, how much space in seawater is there for all of these things, right? So if you're taking up too much space with your calcium, then what else is there not making room for? I don't know, right? So magnesium, I kind of run in the 1350 to 1400. Yeah, I definitely have noticed that Montipora are happier with higher mag. And that's the first thing I tell people if their Monties aren't doing well, is to make sure that magnesium is high. And then I guess we would get to, I don't know, what do you want to talk about? Nutrients? Or you want to talk about microelements?
Well, let's start with nutrients, because I know that's in the parameter realm.
Yeah, that's kind of a big one. That's like probably the thing I get asked the most. And actually, my website does have little write-ups about what I do in my system, so there's quite a bit of information on there. Nice. But generally, the Spss system is running nitrates 15 to 20 ppm. And my phosphates are kind of in the 0.04, sometimes to 0.08 kind of range. I don't really think that your nutrient levels matter that much as long as the ratio is good. Like as long as, you know, if you have high phosphate and low nitrate, you're probably going to have some bad things going on. You know, so a lot of people say that the ratio that is
more important than the numbers
well in reef aquariums is the 100 to 1, or in some cases, some people run more like 200 to 1. So I think that's a little closer to what I'm doing. So like, you know, if I was doing 200 to 1 and my nitrates were 20, then my phosphate would be 0.1. Yeah. Right. So, and I don't really feel comfortable going to 0.2 if I was going to do 100 to 1. It just, that feels like I've just little far. When I've raised the phosphates much more than about that 0.07, 0.08, I find things don't do as well for me. But that's just my system. Okay. You know, I can definitely say that I've seen systems with like much higher nutrients that are in ratio, and they seem to do really well. So I think the ratio is more important than the actual numbers.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. Now, do you do? I guess one before we get into it, pH you mentioned. If you're, you know, so you use a CO2 scrubber to keep the pH up, but your skimmer's off. Which same thing with mine. My skimmer's off, my pH tanks. But what do you target for pH ranges?
So yeah, I'm gonna probably, you know, jump on the bandwagon for some of this Calc oyster stuff soon. I've actually bought a big Calc reactor, and it's nice. Just, you know, it's something you want to do carefully and slowly, and probably just start at night. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the CO2 scrubber is a good kind of quick solution, but long term, it's kind of costly, and it's obviously going to rise. It's going to work well when the media is new, and you get about a month out of it, depending on the space it's in. Some people say they only get 2 weeks. So it's like, you're basically on this subscription model, and it's like, I'm not a huge fan of it. I would rather get rid of it and, start getting the calc thing dialed in.
Yeah.
But for now, it's good. I mean, the other thing is that I used to raise my nutrients, I used to intermittently turn my skimmer off quite a bit. And that was sort of my solution for getting my nutrient levels up. But, I'm so dependent and addicted to watching these pH numbers now.
You can't anymore.
Yeah. No, I'm just like, I can't turn that thing off at all. Because I can honestly tell you, like, the difference of getting your pH up about, 0.01, 0.02 is like, I can see, because it's so amplified amongst the system that's so full of coral, is like, as soon as I put that CO2 scrubber on, I see my alk consumption go up like crazy. It'll be like, I'll have a 0.5 swing within 12 hours, and it's like, so obviously the system's using it. So that chemical reaction that needs to occur, that, that the coral's precipitating those two ions together, it's like, it wants that high pH. So yeah, for sure.
No. So, okay. So James is asking, can you go deeper in how his nutrients is in range? I thought it was usually 10-1. Yeah. So if you have 0.1 or 0.01 phosphate to 10 nitrates, like, I guess he's asking more about your ranges that you keep them in.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that I'm probably running, I've just noticed with my system that it seems happier with lower phosphate. I get worried when I get a reading that's like 0.01 or 0.02, because I mean, like, these HANA checkers, that's what I use. Like, they're measuring like parts per billion, which is like, if you think about that, that's kind of insane, right? It's like that's like, you could probably scoop out 10 mils here and then 10 minutes later do it again, and it's like, your sample might be a little bit different, right? So it's like parts per billion is crazy.
True.
I was thinking about that the other day, and it's like, yeah, we're breaking down these, like, measuring these elements in such micro amounts. So,
true.
But I mean, I would say as a general rule, people should try to keep their phosphates, in that 0.04 kind of range, and don't let it get much lower, because things can die if they drop to zero, especially bottom out. So
usually if it's 0.03 to 0.09, I don't care. If somewhere in that range, then I'm happy.
Yeah, and a thing I'll say about, I found with Euthelia, especially torches, they seem to not like when the phosphates, especially when they jump up quickly. That's when I've seen heads bail out and stuff like that. And I mean, I can't say 100% for sure, but I've heard it from a few other, coral aquaculture people too. So, yeah.
So, okay. There's an interesting question in the chat, but first, are your tanks plumbed together, or are they all separate systems?
Yeah, so I have 3 separate systems. You can probably see most of it. So these are 2 6x3 tables, and they're 14 inches deep. And these are plumbed into the same. So This is just my Spss system. There's a big 9-foot LPS and softy back there. That's 9x4. I think it's about 400 gallons. And then actually, when we moved here, the tank in the corner was the only one that came from the old house, and it's kind of a mishmash in there right now. I just brought in an Aussie order, and there were flat ones on them, so I'm quarantining them in there. So luckily, the Aussie pieces they don't really have anything other than coral tissue. Like, there's very little spot for eggs to be laid. So as long as you get the adults off, it shouldn't be too hard to deal with them. But
nice.
Yeah, they're cooking right now.
Nah. Yep. Okay, so treasure corals, this kind of makes sense if you have a bunch of tanks come together, but he says, do you ever consider running a tank on a staggered light cycle, so there's at least one aquarium always on for higher pH? That's what I was kind of asking, if they're plumbed together or not.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, I think just because, like, I like to work in here during certain hours, like, it would be hard for me to have a tank that was, vastly different. But it's not a bad idea. I mean, I haven't thought about that. Another thing, actually, that brings me to thinking about, and I'd like to try experimenting with at some point, is trying to do a double photo period in a day. And it's something I was talked about 10 or 15 years ago, but I haven't seen too many of the farmer, coral farming people try it. But you could basically do like a
8 on, 8 off, 8 on, 8 off, just alternate.
Exactly, because these corals don't, they don't know. They don't really know. As soon as they're in our captive reefs, like, their connection to the real world is kind of
Flood the moon
kind of
cycle.
severed, so we're playing God here, right? So yeah.
So
So
true.
at some point, it would be cool to have maybe a smaller frag system that I can try something like that with, and try to do some measurable experiments with. Yeah.
If you do that, let me know. I'm curious. I've read about that, and
totally.
I've been curious.
Yeah, but no, Dimitri, good question for sure. I think you actually got me thinking about that now. So yeah.
Yeah, if they're plumbed together, I mean, even just staggering them could minimize your night cycle. And then just since you said you're doing calc, what I've been doing the last month or two is the same thing where you just dose it at night. So I look when my elk
Yeah.
starts to drop, and that's when I start dosing calc. So I dose it from
Yeah.
like 8 p.m. to 9 a.m., something like that. And then I dose as
Yeah.
much as I evaporate. So my ETO hasn't been on in like a month or two now because I just
Yeah,
replaced
that's
with calc.
kind of nice.
So it's
Yeah, so actually, and I never actually gave any numbers on my pH, but generally they run above 8 and kind of hit about 8.35 kind of thing at
nice.
the peak of the day. But I would like to get those numbers up. Something I did recently to kind of level the curve a little bit is I actually use a calcium reactor and I dose like about 50-50.
Yeah.
So I've been turning the calcium reactor off during the most pH depressed periods of the evening. And I do actually, I find that the dosing does buffer the pH a bit. So, and then I just up my dosing. So basically, more of my dosing happens during the night, and more of the reactor happens during the day.
That's actually not a bad idea either. I didn't think of that one.
Yeah. So, and my what I add for my alkalinity for my carbonate is just soda ash, so just sodium carbonate. So like I think some people don't realize that most alkalinity supplements are a blend of sodium bicarbonate and sodium carbonate.
Yeah.
And sodium bicarbonate actually doesn't buffer your pH like sodium carbonate does. So if you can, the other thing you can do is you can take sodium bicarbonate and you can bake it, and that will bake off that extra carbon molecule, right? So it turns, I'm not a chemist, but basically you can bake it and then it'll make it more of a buffering solution too. So.
Yeah.
But I actually just saw that thing about that new product that's it's a 2-part supplement that buffers. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was just shared on Reef Builders or something. But it's and it's not calc waster that's raising the pH in it either. It's
something else.
Yeah, it's some secret mojo. I think the couple that developed it are chemists or something like that. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. That could be a really good product for sure.
That could be cool. Yeah. Okay. Question from Omar. Omar, thank you for the $10 super chat. So he has some issues with corals browning out. He says his polyps are out. Everything else is happy. In your experience, what causes corals to brown out, and kind of how do you fix it?
Yeah, and we're talking about Spss corals.
Yeah, for sure.
Browning out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing I usually would ask somebody is what their phosphate levels are, because, the zooxanthellae, the symbiotic algae that's in your acropora or your Spss, like they like that phosphate. And when there's too much of it, they kind of it's almost a way of thinking about it as like they're overeating or they're getting kind of fat with phosphate. So, I mean, I would make sure that, like I talked about with those nutrient ratios, that, the phosphates are lower. Lighting is not something I want to try to blame right away. Lighting is usually like one of the last questions I ask, but for Spss, I would say, I mean, most Spss are going to want at least 200 par.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range. The other thing about Spss and the browning thing is it's just like there's something about acropora especially where just like some tanks just have like this mojo for it and some don't. And like, my probably the best advice if you want to keep Spss or acros is start with pieces that like have been in the hobby for a long time, like tried and tested, get Cali Tort, Oregon Tort, Red Planet,
the old classics.
Like get the classics. And those corals are awesome too. Like those are the corals that actually look good when you're standing like 5 feet away from the tank, and like a bonsai. Like how awesome was a bonsai? The first time you saw a bonsai, you're like, that's cool.
Oh yeah. Still looks great.
Yeah, absolutely. But some of these corals get overlooked. But if you're adding like designer tenuous to your system, and especially if there's sort of some of these are freshly imported mariculture pieces, like they might come in looking great, but they don't have the track record, right? And some of these tenuous are tricky, especially the red polyp ones. Like that, then you're looking more into trace elements and stuff like that. So Hope that kind of answers the question. But yeah, I mean, I would sort of want to know what corals they're adding, and yeah, placement in terms of lighting and nutrients. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Now,
yeah.
before we actually, okay, so as you're mentioning trace elements, do you focus heavily on do you do ICP tests? Do you focus on all the macro and all the micro trace elements?
Yeah, so I kind of think we should do something like this in 6 months because I've kind of just started really paying attention to it. And actually, Fauna Marin through Big Show Frags, actually, you can mail those ICPs off and they come back fast too. So,
Oh, really?
So that's who
Nice.
I've been using, and they have like a Pro Series kit that measures all the same stuff that the ATI one does. Like it's got the fluorine and some of the weirder, I would say, more potentially, I don't know, toxic ones too. So, so that's a pretty good kit, and I think it's priced reasonably well. So,
Nice.
So I kind of, yeah, like I don't think I'm gonna do the full-on moonshine style method. Like I would rather just kind of pay attention. Like recently, I checked my last ICP and I kind of looked at all of the last three or four of them to see kind of which minor elements were being used on a regular basis. And some of them kind of surprised me a little bit. Like barium is one that just gets sucked out like crazy. And apparently it helps with RTN in corals. It plays some role in that department. So, yeah, I mean, the other thing with some of these trace elements is like sometimes corals use them interchangeably to build their skeletons. Like certain ones, like I think strontium is, molecularly similar to magnesium or calcium or something. So it's like, the coral can use that in place of, one of the other things. So we think, oh, corals need that. It's like, maybe they don't, maybe they just use that instead. It's hard to say. So
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I definitely like to check back with you. Like, I'll do 6 months of kind of really doing, ICP once a month, making adjustments. Yeah, like obviously because I'm packing orders fairly regularly. Like I do little water changes all the time, so there's like a little bit you have to account for some water coming in and out. But yeah. But yeah, I'll probably ease back on the water changes a little bit, maybe once a month, and then just kind of keep an eye on my ICPs and make little changes. So we'll see.
Nice.
Yeah.
When I was hardcore doing the trace elements, like the little daily additions, and everything, like the tank did look good, and it felt more vibrant. Like it's always hard to quantify it, but it did look good. And I've been slacking for a few months, so I'm gonna get back on it too. So in a few months we'll reconvene and compare notes.
Yeah, totally. Good. Well, I did actually just start doing the Fauna Marin, the color element series. So, nice. Which essentially is just you're just kind of guessing on your trace elements that are being removed. So it's just a good guess. So
yeah, so good broad spectrum.
Yeah. So yeah, I've only been doing that for about a week. So I used them years ago, and I feel like things look better. So so we'll see.
Yep. That'll be good. I'm curious to see after a few months if you notice like a noticeable difference. It's harder when you see it every day, but when if you don't see it for a few weeks and you see it again, you'll notice a change. When you see it every day, it's harder to tell like the micro changes that happen every day.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, it's good. That's why you need like reef buddies nearby that can come by and sort of give you an assessment, because they know. If I have a friend's tank I don't see for 2 or 3 weeks and it's either getting better or worse, like I can tell them. So yeah. Yeah,
exactly. Now, okay, so what are you using for flow in your tanks? Or I personally think flow is important, so I'm kind of curious, what do you use and how important do you think it is?
It is important.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, especially for SPS, like the main thing that I kind of always go by is that you have to think about flow passing through every part of the coral. Like there should be no area that the flow is not, getting its way through the little branches in every little part of it. And I mean, yeah, I have tons of flow on these systems. I think I've got 4 Gyre 250s on each side, 250s and 350s. I got 4, and then I've got M2 returns that actually one goes to each tank. So if one ever fails, then one will still be giving flow to both tanks. So
nice.
And then I've got a few MP40s kind of scattered throughout. It's just a bit of a mishmash, but it's just like a complete sheet of water moving all the time. So
lots of flow. Awesome.
Yeah, lots of flow. And I mean, I think flow has some correlation with it's not just obviously growth, but also like pulling off like like toxins and things that could be problems with corals too. I mean, it's like you have to have that flow, especially in higher nutrient systems. So yeah, to deliver those things to the coral. So
yeah, no, 100%.
Big on flow.
Yep. Lighting wise, I see lots of T5s and potentially some Reef Brights or other LEDs for pop on the sides.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit. I've been feeling a little bit as a person that does aquaculture that, I'm still kind of attached to my T5s, but I kind of realized that, like, because most aquarists are not using them anymore, especially things like metal halides. Like, I love metal halides, but like, I do kind of want to be growing things in situations where people are going to have that same kind of lighting in their system. So the T5s to me are just a supplement, just to help kind of spread the space of the tanks. I mean, it's like, I'm basically, this is the tank that actually has the lighting that I really like. It's, so it's an aquatic life hybrid fixture. So I've got 4 Blue Plus bulbs, 80 watts in that. And then there's the Orfec Blue Pop, the Blue Plus bars. And I feel like the pop in those is like, I like it more than the Reef Brights. The Reef Brights have better spread, but these things corals look awesome under them. And then I've got 4 Radion G5 XR15s in the middle there. So
nice.
So it's kind of a hybrid combo of a bunch of things. And I'm switching actually this system over to the same setup, so it'll all be the same. So
nice.
But I think in the summer, just to help with the heat a little bit, and I do have AC in here, but I may experiment with bringing the T5 photo period down maybe to 2 hours or something, and seeing if eventually I can get away with not running them anymore. But right now I just find it's just, I don't know,
it works.
It works.
Don't mess with it. Yeah.
So
now,
I also find I think that LEDs have only really gotten good for SPS in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years. Like,
yeah, I agree.
I feel like they were okay. Like some of the older gens of Radions, like people had some success with them, but it's like, it was about like when the G4s came out and now the G5s, it's like, now it's like they really actually, 100% you can just use that light and grow awesome corals under it.
I would agree. I'd say G4s when they really started to shine, then G5 is just same thing, but more even par everywhere.
Totally. Yeah. Really better diffusion, and just, they're just a nice unit overall. I really like them. So yeah.
Nice. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got that, a couple of questions from the chat before I forget about them. Do you use any supplements, for example, Acropower, potassium, Reefroids? That was from David. Is there anything specific you dose for your tank?
So I do use Reefroids a little bit. Probably I kind of use it a little bit depending on what my phosphate is testing at, because I do kind of find you get a bit of a phosphate spike from it. So once or twice a week for that. Also, like aminos, I don't find them entirely necessary when my nutrients are higher. I think systems with lower nutrients could benefit a little bit more from running aminos, but I've been putting a little Acropower in here again. I used to use it, and I've been putting just a little bit in just to see if anything looks better, and it's hard to say. I mean, like I think in the past when I've noticed a bigger difference from aminos, it's been when I've been running lower nutrients. So
kind of makes sense, actually.
Yeah, overall. Supplement wise, one of the only things that is kind of my like special mojo thing that I add is Zeovit flatworm stop. And so this kind of started because I used it many, many years ago. I tried it when I had Acropora flatworms, like, I don't know, this was probably 6 years ago or something. And I just found that even the corals that didn't have the acro flatworms just looked better. Like, things just started doing better. So I guess it was about maybe March or April last year, I started dosing it, like, not having any flatworms. I'll be clear, I don't have any in the system. And my acros just really perked up from it. So that's kind of just a weird... The thing I don't like about Zeovit is they don't really tell you what's in their products. And I feel like it's... I mean, I understand. They're trying to be like, they're trying to be secretive about, what they're doing and stuff. But it's like, you've got all these blue bottles and they're like, this helps with this. It's like, you don't know if you're adding a certain trace or what. Like, I've heard that the flatworm stop has wormwood extract in it, maybe.
Yeah, I've read the same thing, and I've actually made my own by just buying wormwood extract and like steeping it overnight, then straining it. I made my DIY version of it. I have tried that. It's hard to say if it's the same thing or not, but
well, does it
smell
similar? The same?
It smells similar.
Smells similar. Okay, well that's the main thing, because like it's not cheap for those bottles.
No,
like,
it's expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, on a big water volume, I'm dosing. I dose like 10 mils a day on about 400 gallons. So
I dose about half of what they recommend. I remember Jess back in the day was telling me when he used it, he said it was like crack for corals. He's like, it works awesome, but if you stop, be prepared. So I was always scared to do it a full dose. I only ever dosed it a half dose. So if my tank was 4, I dosed like 2 mils type of thing.
Yeah, it's like it's like a prophylactic dose in a way for what I'm doing, because it also prevents the possibility of flatworms. I don't know. Basically, it makes the acros less palatable and have a better like slime layer on their tissue. So I don't know. And then some people use it in conjunction with the the coral booster.
Yeah.
And I've heard about people having good results with that. So
yeah, same thing. I do that at half dose.
Yeah, for sure. But those freaking blue bottles, though, I mean, too expensive.
I know. But hey, half dose lasts twice as long. But I know.
No, and that's kind of I would say like my biggest tip for people with like that are struggling a little bit with their SPS is try the flatworm stop. Like seriously, it's something. There's some magic mojo in that bottle for sure. So. Yeah.
That's crazy. You should try the wormwood extract for a while and see if you notice the same results.
Yeah,
be interesting.
Totally. Yeah. See if they get See if they get deprived. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. No Beef Happy Reef asking, what causes SPSs to turn green?
The green color would be probably high iron overall. I mean, it's probably a lot of factors to like what your water source is, the quality of your RO and things like that. But that's one of the elements that I know for sure if you overdose it, you'll start to see your yellow acros go green.
Yep.
And there's a balance to it for sure. Yeah.
If you have high nitrate, I also find the yellows tend to be more green, or if they're a bit lower, then you can pull a bit more yellow. That's something else I've kind of noticed over time.
Yeah. And also it could be a par thing too, depending. Like, I mean, I don't know if he's running the kind of lighting or proximity of the corals that are greening out, but I have seen that. I've also wondered if at times that sort of, I've seen corals in people's tanks get that really metallic kind of green kind of pigment throughout, which can look really good. But I wonder if it's something that's changing in the is it a bacteria thing? Is it ballet, taking on some more green fluorescent proteins? I'm not sure, but yeah.
So
have to case by case basis for sure.
That's fair. Okay, speaking of bacteria, do you dose anything like bacterias, or do you worry about that in your tank at all?
So the only bacteria product that I have used in the past couple of years is the Marin Rebiotic.
I've heard of that one.
It's like a freeze-dried bacteria, which I think is a really good way to preserve bacteria. It's basically like target surfaces. So I was finding when I was replacing racks in these systems, I would get a little dino cycle on the racks, that basically was the product that seemed to help with that.
Nice.
You basically mix it up in some tank water and it kind of activates the yeast culture. Basically, it's kind of like making a yeast for a bread or something, right?
Yep.
The way you're activating the culture, and then you just pour it in the tank. It doesn't bother anything, and it seems to help establish those good surface bacteria, and that's where most of the good bacteria is, anyways. So, But something I'll say about bacteria too is like I've always kept live rock from like every system I've ever owned. So I've got,
20 years of special blend.
I think that original, like old school, like real live rock is like, it's overlooked how valuable it is. It's like sometimes you'll see somebody selling it on Craigslist or whatever. And it's like, even if it's covered in pests, like take it and, put it outside for 6 months and then put it in a tub and with fresh water and clean it. And, it's invaluable, really. Like, I don't think I would ever sell any of my live rock. It's just,
It's funny. It's true, though, because, I mean, everything's so sterile now. Like, you don't get that diversity of what originally came out of the ocean.
Yeah, and, the porosity is so good on it, too. I mean, some of the places in Indo are making, manufactured rock that they basically build pieces of live rock and then they sit it in the ocean. So you still get all that bacteria. And seriously, like systems that start with that rock, they get going so much faster than base rock. So, but yeah, you're going to get pests. You might get pests.
Yep. 100%. I know when my original, like years ago, my first reef tank, I bought a bunch of live rock off somebody, and like that tank was pretty easy, no issues, start up right away. Down the road I just went dry rocks, then you go through the uglies a lot more. There's a lot more stuff that you run into that way with the sterile rock.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, sure. So yeah, even if you can just get like some pieces of live rock from somebody's sump that has a really awesome tank. Like I think
I'm gonna steal some when I visit one day.
No, but the diversity of that good bacteria, because like I see people come into the local store sometimes and I see them picking out their dry rock and I'm like, just get a couple pieces from the live rock tub. Like you won't, like, it's the thing is you can't like really quantify it. Like you don't know why a system cycled faster or not, but I can't say I've ever started a system with dry rock and zeobac or whatever, whatever bacteria you're using, right?
Business idea for you. Given how your corals are thriving, you have like 20-year-old rock in your tank. You should throw a ton of like that ceramic meat in your sump and let it sit in there for 6 months and start selling it.
Yeah,
like magic bacteria mix.
My trademark, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Well, I think it's cool that we're starting to learn and talk about bacteria a lot more now because. Actually, when I was tank of the month for reefkeeping.com many years back, 2015, I think. Mm-hmm. And I recently realized I actually talked about in my article that I thought one day people would start testing for bacteria in our tanks and we would start talking about bacteria more. And now it's like, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's starting to be more of a thing. We actually can test for it now. So yeah, but you did the aqua biomics, right? Yeah. And what did it tell you? Like, what was the overall?
I was low on a few things, but overall I was extremely diverse, which is cool. And I partly attribute it to the fact that pre-pandemic crazy, I went to a lot of shows and I pick up corals from all over the place. Mm-hmm. So I had, little chunks of frag plugs or corals from like all over the world, which I think probably helped with my diversity.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah.
And do you run UV?
I did, and then it was off for ages, and then about a week ago I actually just started running it again. So I'm curious.
I wonder if running the UV, if you'll lose some of that diversity.
The free floating stuff you will for sure. It will definitely cut it back. But there's also a ton that lives on surfaces that doesn't necessarily get affected. So do you run UV?
Yeah, and I do on the LPS system right now because I was losing some heads of torches and I had some bacterial infections that seemed to be spreading around, and I put on some fresh carbon. Put on the UV, and I haven't lost a head of my torches since, and it was pretty depressing for a couple weeks there. It really, really hurt because I really try to grow my torches from scratch, I get good healthy pieces that have been in the hobby for a while, and I try to grow them to about 6 or 8 heads before I sell a head, so it's a good sustainable size. And when you've waited a year and a half, 2 years to finally start making frags, and you start losing heads, it's just like, it's really painful. So. I'm down for the UV on that.
So that was my exact reason of why I actually turned the UV back on. Is I have one torch that's doing amazing. The one 6 inches over is all reseeded and doesn't have all that flesh coming down.
Yeah. That's a good indicator of the health of any euphilia is that flesh part extending down for sure.
To me, it's just weird though. It's like happy, not happy, like 4 or 5 inches away. But
yeah.
Now, actually, so for my own personal curiosity, do you have any tricks or tips that you'd use to kind of revive one if it was reseeded a bit?
So I actually, because I did save one recently, I've been dipping the ones that seem like they have a chance in potassium chloride. So I've been using the Reef primer. And I think that does really
help last night.
It helps with the brown jelly infection. If you can actually, if you see that tissue around the euphilia head receding, you can actually glue that. You can use a little bit of super glue, and as long as you get all the necrotic part of the tissue out, you can use a little bit of super glue. And I had a triple head of Holy Grail, of the OG Holy Grail that was going on me, and I sawed off half of one of the heads, and I got all the little bad parts of the tissue. I put it in the potassium chloride, gave it the dip right on the manufacturer instructions, and that head is like going strong, and it's been,
Nice.
a week or a week and a half now. So, and I can even look at it and I can see a little bubble of tissue starting to grow back out in that area. So,
Awesome.
sometimes those little victories feel really good because it's like, it's hard to turn these kind of things around, right? So
It is.
yeah,
Right.
but it is possible. Hopefully that gives people some faith that it's possible to save Euphilia when they're on their way.
I'm gonna try it later and rip out that one torch and try dipping it and stuff. I just keep looking at it, and it's just like it's not. There's still some flesh, but it's definitely receded. It bothers me that it's not in its prime anymore.
Yeah, no, it's sad.
It is sad. So speaking of dipping, what do you do to deal with pests, or what do you use for dips regularly, or?
Yeah, so I feel like dipping is it's changing a little bit right now because the potassium chloride thing seems to be a pretty good way to do it. It doesn't seem to bother tissue that much. I was always a big user of Revive for flatworms, and I would use like a Bayer kind of product for bugs. But I have been finding, in my experience, a lot of those dips don't work very well for acropora bugs, for the little copepods. So whether they're the red bugs, gray bugs, black bugs, whatever type, most dips don't actually work very well. So I'm kind of in a stage now, and like this, especially if you're trading with people in the hobby and stuff, like a lot of corals will have those bugs, but they don't necessarily overrun them. Like certain species are more affected by them. They definitely like the taste of ones more. But the thing that I just do, I just kind of have every 6 months I run Interceptor on my systems, and you actually have to get that prescribed by your vet for your animal.
Is it a bugger to get?
Well, I mean, it depends on your vet. I mean, if you have a vet that's chill and they're like, yeah, like, because I think actually I was talking to my vet about it, and they were like, well, the what was it? The thing that people were taking for COVID that's like a horse dewormer.
Like chloroquine or something else? No.
Yeah, hydroxychloroquine. Yeah. So they were like, yeah, you couldn't do anything with this to like this couldn't. He's like, I don't think. Yeah, there's nothing you could do with this that would be not okay, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, I think milbomycin oxime is the ingredient. I wish you could just somehow find that easy and just dose it, but it's safe to use in the tank other than inverts, or crustaceans die from it. So I mean, my SPS system generally I don't have any hermits or shrimp in them, I just every 6 months I just do a dose on the system and run a course of treatments, and it doesn't seem to bother anything. So it's just to keep my product clean. It's probably a good thing to do. So
no, that's a good way to go. I always wondered how much of a pain it was to get. So,
the other thing is, I mean, there's a lot of other ways to avoid pests. Like, obviously, like, if you're willing to sacrifice the base incrustation of, say, an acro, I would say just do it because, that's where those eggs and stuff are going to be. Always dip. Sometimes if something's fully encrusted around the base of a plug, I will move it to a bigger plug, and then I'll do a ring of glue around the base so that there's no chance of you're kind of like entombing anything that could be around the base of it. But I mean, you should be able to see bite marks or something generally. Like, I actually feel like in the last couple of years, I've seen less people talking about acropora eating flatworms.
So last night I bought a frag.
Yeah.
And it had bite marks, and I was super suspicious. I actually busted out the microscope, and I'm inspecting it. I didn't find a single flatworm at the time, but I saw the bite. So polyps are out, looked happy otherwise. So actually the Reef primer, the potassium salts, put it in there for a couple minutes and just blast it with a little syringe. And of course, flatworm came off, so I ended up tossing the frag. But
that's one way to get rid of it.
I know. Well, it wasn't worth it for a $20-$30 frag to risk it. So it's just But
my understanding of the potassium chloride is that the little bodies of the flatworms just kind of rupture, like cells just kind of explode. So so it is a really good dip for them.
Yep.
And like I said, Revive actually works pretty well, but I think now that potassium chloride's kind of more becoming the thing, I think it's probably the way to go.
I'm a big fan of it lately. I find it works on most things. Like, it seems to be like a solid dip, and it doesn't. I find it's less harsh on corals than like Revive or Coral X. Like, I just feel, I don't know if it is, but I feel like it's a bit gentler.
The other thing I have is I have like a farm grade, and I don't sort of recommend people try to go seek this out because I'm sure it's extremely toxic, maybe carcinogenic. But I have a version of Bayer that is like the farming version, and it's like super like it doesn't have all the other crap in it, and it mixes clear too. So that's actually a really good bug killer.
That's
So,
nice.
Yeah, but some of the other bugs, I mean, we're mostly talking about acros, but Monty nudibranchs are no joke. Like those are probably one of the hardest ones to get rid of.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, one of the reasons is that the nudibranchs actually like will walk around the tank. Like they don't just stay on the coral. Like, so, you know, so even if you can get all of the base tissue out, you know, kill all the adults, even if you can get the eggs off, there might be another one just walking around the tank somewhere. So they're really tough. So, you know, my advice with those is like, just kind of like acros too. Like if you can't see any part of the tissue that isn't living tissue, there's a chance there could be eggs there or something. So glue around it, put it on a disc, put it on something that you can like, you know, entomb and seal in the entire frag, and then you should be okay. So
it's a good way.
Yeah,
I will happily cut off a base now, but when I was like the first like 6-7 years of the hobby, I'm like, no, I can't get rid of my valuable coral. It was so hard to do at first, but now once you've had a past, you're like, nope, not worth it. But because sometimes you're looking at like, you know, 2 or 3 months of progress on that frag, right? So but yeah, once you get good at growing coral, you don't really care about that stuff. You kind of go, okay, well, you know, this will be encrusted in a week or 2 weeks or whatever. So, it grows back.
Something else I would say that I really get people on for like introducing new corals is like check the salinity of your water and the water that it came from, because I find that like some people are starting to be more dependent on salinity probes that come with their Apex units, and I really, really don't trust salinity probes. Like I trust them if you check them against another reference point, but don't just think that that's going to be enough, because you know, I've had a few people message me and they've said, oh, I hadn't tested it, you know, calibrated for a while, and my salinity is like 1.03 or something, and it's like that's the kind of thing I think corals can tolerate, like different alkalinities. They're all the major elements. Those are fine. Like that, you can even temperature. Like you can almost just throw coral in a tank unless the salinity is wildly different.
Yeah,
I feel like that does something to the tissue in the cells, and it seems to shock them. So, and it only takes 2 seconds to check it. So it's like, you know, and if you do find that the salinity is probably more than, let's see, 0.002 or 3 different, you know what I mean? Like, then I would probably do a drip acclimation with them. And generally I would never say to acclimate Aquapora or Spss, but I think if your salinity is like wildly different, then, or no, let's say 0.005, like something like that.
Yeah, more than half of
I would be wary and be careful of it, because I put stuff in and somebody that had a higher salinity in their system and seen stuff peel from that. So
do you know what's funny? Like historically, I didn't trust the salinity probe, and this is like one of the stupid mistakes that I've done like this in the last 6 months. So I saw my salinity was low, and I was like, it's just the probe being flaky, and ignored it. But my salinity actually was low. And then of course I raised it too fast, and I had some fallout of a couple things that started STN and fragged them. Like thankfully they're growing back now, but my own stupidity of just not double checking it bit me in the butt.
But also, like, what was your method to raise the salinity?
So what I should have done is just like throw my ATO in the saltwater bin or something and let it just top off with salt.
Just top it off with salt water.
But I would just like mix up like salt with a pitcher of RDI water and dump it in my sump every like 4 or 5 hours. But I did it too fast. Like I raised it in a couple days, and it probably dropped over like a month. So it's like,
yeah, because freshly mixed salt can be pretty caustic, and you want those like chemical reactions to all kind of meld together so the salt's ready to, you know, the salt water's ready. So yeah, totally.
It's one of those things where like I would have told somebody not to do it, and then you do it yourself. Like it's always how it works.
I was going to say something else on the pest and introducing coral thing too, is now that there's a lot more mariculture stuff coming in, you know, you can chop off. I mean, it sucks to lose the base, because those mariculture bases actually have some good. We were talking about bacteria; they have some good bacteria on them too, right?
Yeah.
Like you're getting these like nice bacteria cultures from the ocean, which is pretty ideal. But I mean, like if you can't see around every part of the base, if you don't have a quarantine system or a separate system, you can try something in it first. and you can't see around every little bit of that, where the base is. It's like you're not going to see eggs or anything. So if you want to be 100% sure, just get some bigger discs and chop that thing off and put it on a glue around the base and start fresh kind of thing.
That's a good way to do it, because you're not necessarily losing that growth, but you'd be sealing in any potential eggs. So
yeah, totally. So,
like
like I say, it's tough because you have to let go of that mariculture base, which sometimes you're losing a few months of growth, or you're losing that good bacteria. But you could, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could, I don't know, save that base for something in another system or something that doesn't have acros in it. I try to save them if I can, but
no, it's not a bad idea too.
Yeah.
Okay, Emmanuel, how would you transfer your Spss frags in quarantine to the main display tank? Would you glue them directly to the rock or let them acclimate on a frag rack?
Yeah, I've seen people leave stuff on the frag rack for too long before, and it's like it's not a great spot in the tank. It's like I mean, this depends on your quarantine and what the lighting is going to be compared to what's in the tank. Like if the lighting is quite a bit lower than your tank, obviously you want to start them out lower, but I mean, like frag racks tend to be on the side of the tank where there isn't a lot of flow. Lighting wise, you can kind of change the height of them. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in my experience, like corals want to be mounted to something firmly. And as soon as you get something like mounted and glued to a rock, it starts putting down a base, that's when it really starts to like make itself at home. So, I would say if your lighting is similar, then just put them on the rock. And I mean, don't be too obsessed with par. Like I think people get way too like obsessed with the numbers of par. It's like I can tell you that like my corals, like when things are really like doing really well in my system, the coral in the spot for light still looks awesome.
Yeah.
It finds a way to look awesome. I don't know how, but so it kind of goes to tell you it's like it's not, light doesn't matter as much as we sometimes think. We sometimes look at it and go, yeah.
Okay. So on the par side, what do you target for par ranges in most of your systems?
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend. I actually don't own a par meter because
Really?
I don't want to be too obsessed with it. But I have a friend that will bring one over sometimes,
Nice.
and so it's that works out for me. But so I think we measured kind of at the surface. I'm at around 500, 550 on this system, and then probably around 250, kind of around the lower kind of areas.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say most of my SPS are getting like 300 to 400, like on the higher parts of the racks kind of thing.
Yeah. Then roughly how many hours, since your T5 is pretty much consistent all day, roughly how many hours do you run your lights?
So it's about a 11-hour photo period, and it starts with just the radions coming on at a low level of blue. And then I have the Orphex come on for, I think, 10 hours. The radions are like a half hour on either side of the Orphex. And they ramp up, and my like photo period where they're at their peak is about 6 hours, where the radions are at their peak, and my whites are at about 60%. That's with the schedule at 100%. My whites hit 60%.
So
and obviously blues are all 100%. UVs I have a little bit down. All the other ones are low, like the red and the green and the cyan. I keep around the 5 to 10% range, but I put a little bit in there. And this is just the SPS system. Obviously, the LPS system is different.
Yeah.
And then the T5s are run for 6 hours.
Okay, so about 6 hours all out, and about 5 hours kind of ramping up and down with all the different lights.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I know like Worldwide Corals is kind of on a little bit of a thing about having corals, or having your peak period being only 4 hours total. Which I think, if you think about corals in the ocean, it's like the sun is never hitting them at that peak angle for the for any duration of time. It's moving across the whole time. So I think it does make sense to not blast them with your fullest period of light for too long, because I used to run T5s for 10 hours a day, and now it's like they're just kind of a little boost. And even like for I think some of the coral farmers that are running metal halides, they're probably just using those as a peak daytime. Like I've seen an awesome tank that ran metal halides, and it was 2 hours at the peak of the day. And, it's like that's not really going to hit your electrical bill that much or heat the tank very much if it's only 2 hours. And it's going to give you this really awesome light for a bit. But,
I do roughly four or so hours where basically I just boost my whites way up on the radion just for a little extra power for that period.
Yeah. So what do your whites come to at their peak point? My tanks are also really shallow, so keep that in mind. Like they're only 14 inches deep, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, look, I'm curious now. But yeah, so basically I have like an AB plus-ish in the afternoon, but I think like 11 or 12-ish till 4 p.m. I crank my whites up a lot more, so it's just a very super crispy, bright white. Basically, I do that for more power, for more of a, I don't know. I feel like it gives me more coloration out of corals, but hard to say 100%, but that's kind of like the vibe I get from it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I feel like PAR is also like has a lot to do with your nutrient levels. So if your nutrient levels are higher, your corals can kind of handle more light. Because it, like those, like corals kind of getting darker are kind of almost in a way they sort of have like, it's like a sunscreen to the light. So they're sort of protecting themselves from the light. So, if your corals are darker, they can probably handle more light, and then you might potentially be able to pull more color out of them. So,
okay. So I bump my warm whites up to 50% 50% during that time. And the rest of the time they're at 20. So I bump them up by 30% during those hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll try 60. I'll do 55. I'll do closer to yours.
At the end of the day, I kind of had this realization a little while back. Is like, we kind of need to think about corals sometimes as if they're not just one organism. Like, think about them like they're like a hybrid organism. It's a type of algae, and it's a what is it? Cnidarian or coral species. Anyways, you're talking about an animal and a plant that are together. And they both have kind of different needs, right? It's like, I don't know if the coral needs some of those metals like iron and stuff, but definitely like photosynthesis and like the parts of the algae that they utilize those things. So, just think about like the animals in our tanks and what they really require and need. I mean, plants need nitrogen and phosphate, right? Like that's what fertilizers are. So it's like, that's what we're putting them in our tanks for. The coral's just kind of getting like some like added bonuses from that. I don't really know exactly how the process works that the coral derives energy from the zooxanthellae, but I mean, obviously that's the structure. So yeah.
Yeah, totally does. Okay, Bobby, my question is, what's the hardest SPS to keep for you? Do you have any that are like your nemesis that are just a bugger?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hardest SPS, like something that's just like continually just like does badly or doesn't do. I do find that my milliporas really cycle to do well for me and not. And it's not like I like lose them and it's just they completely go to shit, but they're kind of up and down for me. But yeah, as far as specific coral, what's been like a hard one to keep? There's one that I imported a while back, and it's Acropora salago. If you look up pictures of yellow or pink Acropora salago, they can be just a beautiful acro. And I imported one, and it looked pretty good when I got it. And it's just brown, and it's been like a year, and I'm just like, I'm getting to a point where I'm ready to. It might be a porch coral. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but we'll see. And I've actually tried shipping it to people, and it hasn't shipped well either. So it's kind of like one of those corals that might not be worth it. So
that's fair.
The other coral that I would like to get more of that I know people have found to be difficult are the Malaysian speciosa. Those are like the flaming sunrise, and so those are some of the most awesome acros that I've ever seen. And I haven't heard about a lot of people having really great success with them.
Yeah. I know what those are now. I've seen photos of those. Some of those are crazy.
There's seriously some, and I've seen them I had a few of them that I got from Reef Canada. They were some of the coolest, brightest, craziest acros I've ever seen. So yeah,
that blue and yellow one is super cool.
Yeah, it's probably the Flaming Sunrise. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, slow growers too. You can just like everything you can guess about them. It's like not easy to keep.
Sounds about right. Ghouls, when will Adam have Walt Disney and Homewrecker back in stock?
Oh, actually, I probably will soon. I will sell some of my OG Homewrecker. I've been patient with that one. I really try to, like, when I grow something out, I try to let it get to a certain size. It's like if I frag it when it's small, it's gonna set me back 3 or 4 months. It's like the Homewrecker exploded a while back, so there's like probably like 25, 30 tips growing on it.
Nice.
So each of those is potentially a frag, so I might as well wait until they're about an inch each. before I cut it.
Yeah.
And yeah, Walt Disney, that's a coral that had been frustrating that I had
Ooh,
grown.
yes.
You know, a nice big colony of, oh yeah, and you want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I grew a nice big colony of that and I had lost it at one point. So the ones I'm regrowing are little mini colonies. So I get a frag every once in a while off them, but again, I just like to be patient and let it grow. But yeah, so you had a Walt Disney that it was encrusting, but not really growing.
Yeah, it's starting to get little nubs, but the weirdest thing, it's been on the edge of a rock, but instead of just crusting down, is growing out like a plate. There's like, that much of it that's just like building its own plate into the abyss off the side of the rock. It's been the weirdest growth. Does
it have growth tips?
I'm trying to find a photo. I know I sent you one the other day.
Yeah, you sent me the photo, and I didn't think it did. I mean, this is like the old like Spss stimulation tip is to just cut it.
Yeah.
And some corals respond really well to it. Like I had a Walt Disney that didn't do anything for a while, and it was just an encrusted base, and I cut the sort of most top nub of it off, maybe about 1/4 of an inch, and I got like a nice blue growth tip within a week or two, and that eventually turned into my big colony.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's looks like there's starting to be some nubs on it. Just looking at one of my terrible photo, but trying to zoom in there. Yeah, it's
probably starting. But yeah, I mean that's what I was gonna say is like if it's not growing, just cut it, because like I've had pieces that sat in my system for many months, and I've just kind of looked at them and I've watched them encrust. But if you don't have those axial growth tips going, then like you're basically going like, either I'm just gonna sit and look at this thing, just kind of just be this encrusting mass, or give it a chance. Like you can also just take that little piece and mount it somewhere else. Maybe it'll encrust, and eventually you'll cut that.
Well, I'll throw a chunk in the new aquascape in the new tank and see how it does. So good test subject.
Yeah, but I would say like that irritating thing, stimulating them. Like I remember like having one of those little yellow what are those? Are they yellow clown gobies? Those little tiny little like small little gobies. And it was in a millipora. This is like forever ago. And I noticed that it was nipping at the polyps. So I've got that fish out, and then everywhere where that millipora was damaged started a new growth tip in those spots where the bite marks were. So, and that's only like biting just the tissue at the top of the coral. It's not even like getting deep into the skeleton. So, definitely big acro ninja tip is to cut the tips.
Yeah. What about the encrusting ledge off the side? Think I just snap a chunk off that, or does that count?
I think you could. I mean, because you might start getting growth along the inside edge from where you cut it too. Okay. I mean, like don't be too sacred about it. It's going to look so much better when it starts growing rapidly than it is just being what it is now. So
true.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I'm gonna break a chunk off and try it. I threw a few test subjects in a few days ago, so next week if they're still happy, it's coming.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, do you ship to Quebec?
Yes, I do ship to Quebec pretty regularly. So yeah, and I should say there probably will be like a Easter sale coming up. So
nice.
Yeah. So little plug.
Excellent. Valhalla, any tips to get millipore to grow? Super slow growth for mine for over a year.
Yeah, like I can even say like I've had times where millies just don't really love me, and but I think they seem to like nutrient levels to be, I would get the nitrates to at least 10. So it's hard to say with these comments without knowing a little bit more information as far as what people are running. But and then the other thing is, if they're not growing, like try cutting a little bit of them, because if you don't have, corals kind of go into like a dormant sort of like non-growth stage. So you need to get them growing, because that's where a lot of the best color is too. Yeah. So if you don't want to look at a base for 6 months, then chop it.
Do it. I've had a lot of people actually say that fragging does stimulate growth, but you also want to let it be a decent size first. Like, don't frag your tiny frag, because that's not going to get you anywhere.
No, totally. Yeah, for sure.
Jared, what's your favorite coral? Do you have any favorites in your tank?
Oh yeah, I was wondering if this would come up. Favorite? I mean, I would say I really want to try to get more of the Malaysian speciosa, or the species.
That's cool.
The thing that happened is when Indonesia's export was shut down, some of the other countries in Southeast Asia started looking into exporting. So Malaysia started like looking at corals that they had, And they, obviously different region, you're going to see some different stuff, because the speciosa that are in like closer to Bali, where a lot of our mariculture coral come from, they don't have anything like that.
Yeah.
So we saw some coral that we'd never seen before, and it was like insanely nice. And then when Indo opened back up, I guess a lot of the CITES for exports went back to Indonesia. So, anyways, that's a long answer, but Flaming Sunrise, I think, is one of the best all-time macros. As far as things that I have, I love the Walt Disney Homewrecker. TGC Cherry Bomb is probably one of my best tenuous. It's super big, fluffy red polyps, and it's like really, really red too. It's just like,
nice.
It's not like any mariculture piece I've seen come in. That's the thing, is like some people think like, oh, now the mariculture stuff is as good as some of these pieces that have been around for a while. It's like, I mean, yeah, some of them look good at first, but like they don't all do well long term. And you're still better going for these pieces that are established and have been around for a while.
Yeah. Well, especially too, like if it's aquaculture in a tank versus mariculture in the ocean, like it's going to be more adapted to those tank conditions. It's gonna be harder too. That's another thing people don't always consider.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, you're taking something out of like essentially like it's like home ideal habitat, and you're trying to put it into a life support system. So, some of the other ones I really like, Reef Raft USA Firecracker is one that I have on my site that is probably one of my best, and I've got some in stock actually I need to put on. Yeah, and then just the classics, like the Reef Raft Rainbow Loom is still like one of the best,
Oh, okay.
The best corals.
Your Rainbow Loom goes from purple to orange to green. Mine goes purple to green. What is your magic?
And I've seen that in some people's tanks, because I had to replace my colony a while back, and the piece that I got was, it had a little purple in tips, but it wasn't like, it didn't spread all the way through. I really think it has to do with how rapidly it's growing, because, if that growth tip is like growing faster, then that color kind of gets diffused over the whole like axial tip. I mean, the other factors, I don't know. Like, I don't think, the difference between our systems, like, I don't think it's a trace element based thing necessarily. And I've had the similar color on it in my tanks, whether my nutrients were higher or lower. It's kind of always looked like that.
Okay.
So I don't know. That's just always been a good coral for me. So, we always have our star players, right? There's certain things that like do well for some people and not so well for other people. So,
okay, I'm just going to quickly pull it up on your site and just show to like the comparison.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I was looking, I'm like, how the heck do you get that orange out of it?
Yeah. Another just like good all-time like classic acro is the ORA Hawkins Echinata. That one is it's one of my favorite all-time classic pieces. Red Planet, Cali Tort, Oregon Tort.
Yeah. So Red Planet has been my nemesis coral. I've tried it like 4 times, and it was finally growing in my tank after like all these attempts, and my freaking Ghani like stung it and like killed off my branches, and I was back to just seeing crushing bits. I'm just like,
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually posted a photo today. Okay, so for those in the chat, I mean, this is a macro photo on mine, so it's not a straight up comparison, but it goes purple to like super orangey, then down to green. Or mine, it goes purple to green. But yeah, that orange in yours looks super cool.
Yeah, I think it's like an extension of the growth tip, really. Yeah.
But yeah, that firecracker one looks pretty sweet too.
Yeah, it's really nice for sure.
That one's definitely a
and
beauty.
I'm a big fan of. I feel like it's a less sort of like most people that don't really know Acropora species, they'll know like they're Millipora and tenuous, but Latistella is one of the ones that I really like collecting, and I've got a couple different ones on the site. The Gila Monster, I think, is a Latistella, and I've got one I just call Hot Pink Latistella. That's a really, really bright hot pink.
Nice.
And I've imported some too, and I got about 4 or 5 of them that are just not coloring up for me. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, they could be awesome. We'll see.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so on coloring up, is there what do you think is the key to getting like better coloration out of corals?
Yeah, so I think it's like a combination of nutrient levels, high par, and probably certain trace elements. I mean, I can't tell you for sure which ones are the most important. I mean, the ones that I keep probably the closest ion are potassium. I do find my ICPs, my iodine tends to be good, but I know that's an important one as well.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure you don't want your iron to be 0. And Hannah actually makes an iron tester, and it works exactly the same as the high range nitrate and the phosphate kits. So you just put the packet of stuff in, shake it up, 2 minutes, whatever. Okay. So it's a nice quick test, and it'll give you like I think a pretty accurate reading. Yep. And yeah, so I think those are 3 of the ones that we know kind of seem to matter. I've definitely noticed potassium over the years seems to affect the blue in the Cali and the Oregon torts. Any of the torts seem to, get less blue if you don't have potassium.
Do you know what you keep your potassium at?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does get used, because if I don't dose it, then, it can drop to 370, 360 kind of thing. But you want to shoot for around 400 and, don't raise it too fast. Some people have had really good success with like elevated levels of potassium. Yep. I think if you're going to try that, just do it real slow.
Just don't go too high. That gets dangerous.
And I should also say, like, any of these trace elements, and like say you send up an ICP and it says raise this over this many days with this amount of milliliters. Like, one thing is, like, make sure that you are absolutely certain of your water volume and that it is accurate to what you're basing your calculations on. And also just to be safe, raise it like slower than what they even tell you. Like, do it half as fast as what they tell you. Because it's like, it's going to be fine, but like I just don't want to mess around with those things. Like, if I'm going to put copper in my tank on purpose,
not over 2 days, do it over a week.
Yeah. If it says, this is safe to dose over 2 days, it's like, screw that. I'm going to do that over a week, So
that's fair. Especially copper. Certain ones are probably wise advice. They're important, but in small amounts. Too much is trouble.
And the other thing is that we're assuming that these ICP tests and this equipment that is testing it is 100% accurate, and it definitely isn't necessarily. Yep. And also, like, water from your tanks could be different in one area to another, like, just depending on the tank. You're only taking a small sample of your water from your tank, right? So you can't say that all of these elements are saturated evenly amongst every little bit of your water. So,
Very true.
And another thing, actually, I would say for testing is try to, if you're testing nutrients, especially, like, test them on the same time every day. Like, don't test them after you feed, or like, be a bit of a schedule for when you test. Same with like acidity or anything. It's like, just test at the same time, because if you're testing at different times a day, your system's going to metabolize things at certain rates, and that's going to change. So, or test and then put the time of day next to it. Yeah. So you kind of know, right?
No, that's a good point. I mean, with elk, I always stress time of day, but it makes sense for nutrients too, especially if your correlation to when you feed the tank is going to cause big swings in your test.
Because if you do it right after you feed, then obviously you're going to have like a bump of nitrates and phosphates, and it's not really going to be accurate to what the system really is when it's just in its like steady kind of daytime state. So yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so speaking of testing, do you use auto testers, manually test?
So I do a fair bit of manual testing, and I do have Tridents on 2 of these systems. I do find it necessary to test like at least a couple times a week, just to make sure nothing's going sideways, because I've found, especially the Trident, which I can tell you for sure, they've actually gotten better. I don't know if it's the firmware that has just like somehow adapted to whatever little variants happen, but I don't trust the calcium and the magnesium tests when the reagents get down to about 25% or less. So once they get down around there, just like, I think they're fine for I don't find the alkalinity one I find the alkalinity one is rock solid. It's pretty much always on. Yeah. I find it tests maybe just a little touch lower than the Salifert. For just general testing, I trust Salifert. I mean, Salifert's been around for so long, and it's kind of the gold standard, I think, for tests. I mean, the Hannah alkalinity is good, but I've had it be weird too, because it's doing that. It's like light spectrometer, not spectrometer, but
photometer, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, photometer or whatever. Yeah, so it's there's a little blemish on the vial or whatever could change it. Whereas like I know when that solution changes when I'm doing alkalinity. So
That's fair.
yeah. So, but yeah, you were saying you got one of the not the Alcatronic, the Mastertronic.
Yeah. Okay. So
right?
this is
Yeah.
hardcore. So I have an Alcatronic and Mastertronic in each tank, which I've been using for years. Like, absolutely love it. And I was curious about your Trident because I actually got a good deal on one, so I decided to get one because I've been asked a bazillion times to review and compare it. So slightly excessive to have 2 auto testers on a tank, but it's happening.
Yeah.
So
Well, it'd be interesting to do them side by side.
Yep.
Actually, something I would say about a Trident too, and this kind of makes me laugh a little bit, is people that put them on a brand new tank. Like, to me, it's like if it's a brand new tank, it's like it's not going to be changing very much. Like, if you only have like a few frags in there, like wait, and like, because you're pay basically on a subscription model to pay for reagents for this thing. It's like, just test manually, sort of start to get a feel for what your system uses. And when you have a bunch of coral in there, they're growing fast, and there's a big investment in there, then put a Trident on there. But like, otherwise, like, your levels aren't going to change very fast, right? So so I think a Trident is something that's maybe for an aquarium that's depending on how fast you're stocking it and how fast you cycle the system, it might not be something to put on a tank until about 6 months in. But some people just like all the tech, right? So they just want to throw stuff on there. Yeah. Well,
I'm a gear junkie, so definitely. Valhalla, cheers to you too. Thanks, buddy. Cheers from White Rock. Cheers from Kelowna and where? Victoria, right?
Nice. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Yep. Cheers. So, yeah, so I don't know. I think the auto testers are interesting. Like, I don't think people need them, but they're definitely nice to have. Or if you're a good manual tester. I'm a slacker, so I mean, over time I got more of a slacker, so the auto testers kind of filled in the gap for me. But
yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, and I mean, for the most part, I think they're pretty reliable. It's just don't get too complacent with them and just think that they're going to handle everything for you. You should still do some manual testing. So
more important for you because you have a ton of coral in your systems. But every once in a while I will do a double check, or I'll like note what it is the same day I take an ICP sample and compare it and just kind of do those little random checks here and there.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the reasons I have the calcium reactor and the dosing, is that if one method ever has a problem with it, like a dosing line is blocked, or I guess the reactor feed effluent could be blocked, or something could happen with that, or I run out of CO2. I mean, I have alerts on my Apex to tell me if the pH of the calcium reactor goes above a certain amount. But but I mean, it's like basically if one method goes down, at least I'm not losing. It's not going to drop as fast as it would. So
only half the drop.
Yeah, some of the things that I do, for growing coral at a sort of more commercial kind of level, is like they're not going to apply to people's like home aquariums necessarily, because it's like the volume of coral in there is not going to be what most aquariums are, right? So
that's fair.
Even just things like trace elements, like if it's a young tank and you're using a good quality salt, it's like that you're probably starting with a pretty good base point of salt and trace elements, right? So that's why some people do really well for the first little while. Like I it's kind of like that I don't know, beginner tank. Like once you kind of get some progress and you've gotten through your cycle, it's like obviously like all of those elements are going to be available for those corals, as long as you're not running it too nutrient deprived. But then when the real test is when you start getting some big corals and big colonies that are consuming a lot, and a lot of things that are competing for all of these things, then it's like then you need to start looking at, I think, a little bit more detail as what the system is using. So,
and the other thing is, it's going to change as you add those big colonies or stuff grows out. Your demand is going to constantly change. So if you're not aware of it, eventually you're going to deplete stuff. They'll catch up.
I mean, no tank ever stays the same forever. It's like it's one of the saddest parts of the hobby, is that when you get things doing really well, that at some point they're not going to do that well.
Just enjoy it.
Just enjoy it while it's doing really well, and try to like make notes and be aware of why it's doing well. So you can apply that in the future. But it's part of it. It's like right now, are my SPS systems are they as good as they were back in December? Not really. Like, they're okay. Are they like, they're maybe 5% not as good, but it's just how it is, right? So like, obviously corals that I have, the pictures of corals that are the stock photos on my website are when those corals were at their absolute best, and I drew my best to keep them at that. That's my standard for them, but I can't say that every coral at every time is always going to look as good as it does, at its peak, right? We're all just striving to attain, the maximum best color and growth. So
every coral.
every coral, and these corals are collected from different regions and different, parts of the world, and they probably have different requirements. So, just try to average out, and don't be too obsessed about the fact that maybe, one species isn't doing super well, and start doing a bunch of stuff, because, just kind of be okay with the fact that maybe one or two corals don't look very good for a few months, because they might turn around, right? So,
well, and you could, you could be obsessing over one coral where the other 20 are looking amazing, right? So
yeah. Totally.
Now,
so well, for me it's like the other couple hundred.
Exactly.
Look good.
So you mentioned a good quality salt. I did see a couple people ask in the chat a while back of what salt you use.
I've actually been using Brightwell. So I believe Brightwell and Tropic Marin are the two that are manufactured salts. So they're not using a mined. Or they're not using a salt that's evaporated salt water.
And hydrosalts.
So I actually think they're fairly similar products, and I think some people overlook Brightwell a little bit. I use it because I also, through the local store, it's the product that we get on a regular basis, so I know I can always get it.
Nice.
And I mean, something I also would say about salt mixes is, like, even though this whole Tropic Marin thing came up and, some people were having issues with it, it's like all salt manufacturers at some point, or either they have or they will have some problems, because it's just like,
it's inevitable.
It's inevitable. So something that I actually do is I test my alkalinity usually on every mix of salt that I make up. I used to, I actually for years used Instant Ocean, and I used to just doctor my Instant Ocean. So I used to just do it and then test it, and then I'd adjust the calcium. I'd put some calcium chloride in there and bring it up to levels, and actually that worked really well for me. But it's not a bad idea to test your salt mix every once in a while. Because things can get weird. I had a friend that sent off an ICP of his salt mix, and I won't say what brand it was or whatever, but there was extremely high levels of manganese in it, extremely high. So something was going on, and luckily, it didn't. That didn't translate into a major issue over his system, but. I'm actually a big believer in larger water changes less often. I don't really like small water changes regularly, just because I think that if you're doing small changes, so say you do 10% a week, you're just the next week you're just replacing some of the water you just replaced, whereas if you're doing, you know what I'm saying? It kind of seems a little bit counterintuitive. I mean, it's nice that the system is getting some new clean, fresh water more often, but I'm a little bit more of a fan of a 20 or 25% water change less often, because then you're really replacing some of those trace elements and stuff when you do that bigger water change.
That's fair.
It does leave you more susceptible, though, to if it's a bad salt mix, to having some that, right? So
I went down this rabbit hole way back when, and supposedly the difference that you're actually rechanging is only a few percent, so I never really worried about it. My initial rationale was okay, you're not draining the tank down, you're not exposing stuff to air, so it's in theory less impactful to the tank if you just keep little ones. But no, I've always been curious the different rationales behind it.
That's kind of my reasoning, and I think you're right though, because when you do the math on the actual water you're taking out again when you do that 10% a week thing, it's actually fairly negligible, right? So
it was 9. I think it was less than 5 or 6%. I can't remember what the actual number was. It wasn't a big difference, but no, that makes sense. That's fair.
But I mean, I think there's a lot of good salts on the market. It's just like I was saying, I for years, when I had my tank of the month tank, that was my last real display tank. That was Instant Ocean, and I just bought Instant Ocean, and I just brought up the alkalinity and the calcium. Actually, the magnesium was sometimes really low. It'd sometimes be 1,000. It'd be super low. So no, I think the Brightwell is a good product. And other than that, I don't know if I have a favorite. I mean, I think that Tropic Marin is going to be probably more consistent than ever now that they've had a little stumble.
Probably,
it's probably actually a reason to go back to them. once they get their new manufacturing sorted out, it's probably going to be a good salt again. So,
yeah, definitely. What else do we have for questions that we didn't hit yet? Just scrolling through. Yeah, if I missed your question in the chat and you want to ask, let me know. Sammy, BRS did a study. I think they said average is about 5% loss. Yeah, so it wasn't. It was like 95% still new water.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So you could you could argue me on that one. I can understand that.
I mean, either works, but
yeah.
The one reason I like to do like little automated higher frequency ones is because then I don't care about the parameters. That you don't have to worry about water temperature. If the elk or one of the parameters is bought off, it doesn't really matter because it's such a little amount that you're dosing takes care of it. So that was my kind of rationale.
Totally. And I do find actually the Brightwell is a little lower alkalinity than my system. So I do see a little bit of a dip every time I do one. So and again, I could doctor the salt mix up. I could add some, sodium carbonate to it. But
James, did he mention his nutrient export? What do you use for skimmers? Do you use refugiums? What do you do to deal with nutrients?
That is a good question. So I do use protein skimmers, obviously, because it's a big part of the oxygen exchange in my system too. I've actually not had success with refugiums very much. My systems I've always run, I guess, what you would call a cryptic sump. And with live rock, and I do make a strong effort to take my live rock out and rinse it, and do as part of my water change, I rinse all the detritus out of my live rock that's in my sump. I think that's important to not let that go for too long. Refugiums, I don't know, like my systems, because there's so much coral in them, I find that if anything, I'm usually adding nutrients to them. I would say that I don't, but it really depends on how much you feed and your fish load and your essential, like your biomass of your coral, because once you start getting some bigger corals in there, like you'll just see nutrient levels dropping. So but
you have so much coral, it's probably not an issue at all. So
and I like refugiums. The thing I don't love about them is there's not really much exact science to them. Like you're just kind of like pulling out like X amount of nutrients, and you don't really know exactly how much. It's like you get a feel for it, right? But and some of those algae, they'll pull out iron and some of your trace elements that your corals might want too. So or your corals, let's not say your corals, your zooxanthellae and your corals might want. So
that's always been one thing that's messed with me a little bit, is because I would run a refugium because I always have high nutrients because I have too many fish in my tank. So that's usually an issue. But at the same time, I know that algae is pulling, between either Chaeto or GFO, I know it's pulling out some of the trace elements I'm adding, which feels a little bit counterproductive. But
because some people add that Chaeto grow, some people say Chaeto, right? But some people
Chaeto.
add that, which kind of it takes some of the elements that the Chaeto is pulling out. I don't know. I think it's right for some people. It's not really for me. So none of my systems have refugiums or any kind of algae export.
Once you have enough coral, your coral's going to be sucking up that nitrogen phosphate. So
for sure. And a good tang gang too. And I think that's something that another thing to consider when you're bringing in corals from anybody that sells frags or whatever is that, like, most of these frag operations are fairly big systems that probably have a nice variety of tangs that are like chomping away at all the racks and all the little bits of the bases of the corals. But if you have like a little nano and you're putting a plug in from a system that has been mowed, like the lawn has been mowed on it, so to speak, on a regular basis, you might get some weird algae popping up on that base because, you don't know what, like, I don't know what I have in here. All I see is a bunch of clean racks and some tangs that are, fat. But I think a good tang gang is good. Actually, this is kind of I've been telling a lot of people about this lately, is it's like my employee of the month, I would call it, is tail spot blennies. Tail spot blennies are sweet. So they're like kind of like almost like a mini tang in a way, because they can get into all the little spots that other fish can't, because they're little slinky kind of blenny guys. And they keep the racks clean in my tanks. So I've been and can add multiple per system too. They seem to get along with each other. So so that was I don't know, good little tip for algae maintenance.
I'm gonna get one for my office tank. I like it.
No, get three.
Three? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big tank. I'll get at least two to three.
Yeah.
So now on the wish list.
Start with 2.
Okay. Excellent. Steven's asking, how do you get your cherry bomb to be super red? Mine's very pastel.
I think tenuous more than any other acro that I keep. They really like the higher nitrates. So, yeah, like I would say mine is, I mean, my nitrates are around 20. Like they kind of range. Like I've had them at 25 before and I haven't noticed a big difference, but I kind of, my goal is 20 just because it's an even number. But par probably around 300 for that piece, 300 to 350. And yeah, I mean, that one does not seem to be a hard one to keep the red polyps on for me. But I would check some things like potassium. I know potassium is more associated with blue, but I've heard some people say it's associated with reds too. So, yeah.
When I overdosed potassium, I noticed I had actually the tank felt very vibrant actually when I overdosed it, but you just don't want to go too high or else it's like danger zone.
Yeah. Actually, you know, I should look at this is the color elements. So the red has potassium in it, iodine, fluorine, bromine. But I think that the blue one also has potassium. So no, it actually doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the blue purple doesn't. Yeah.
Now, so if you're obviously your coral's sucking up most of your nitrates and phosphates, are you dosing nitrates or phosphates to your tank at all?
Yeah, so the nitrate I use is the ESV nitrate, which is, I think it's some nitrate. Okay, so something about nitrate supplements is some of them are potassium nitrate, which you need to be careful with because you're raising the potassium and your nitrate, right? So you can't overdo it. And then I think the ESV is like potassium. It's like more of like a calcium derivative or a balanced supplement. So I think it's like, is it potassium calcate or something? I don't know. Either way, it's I think it's a safer product to add than some of. So just be careful when you just look at the bottle, and it should, you know, unless it's one of those sneaky little bluesy of the bottles, it should tell you what's actually in it.
The mystery bottles.
Yeah. So I've been using the ESV for that, and then I just use the Brightwell Neophos for my phosphate. And you know, the phosphate, it doesn't really matter what brand you use, whatever is like a good price. The Photomarin I think comes in a liter for their phosphate product, which is a nice big bottle. So yeah,
nice.
I'm in big bottles.
Yeah, last a while. Reef to sea forever. Some potassiums raise elk, so they don't raise elk directly. You're probably using something like potassium nitrate, or potassium hydroxide, if that's mixed in, which is going to remove the CO2 from your water, which in turn bumps up your pH and your elk. So they don't directly raise it, but kind of indirectly it gives you that bit of a boost.
Yeah, and I don't think most hobbyists are putting potassium hydroxide in their tanks. That's pretty heavy duty stuff.
Yeah, it's nasty. I played with that. Don't do it.
You know where to get that shit? I don't know where to get
I have some. I've dabbled.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Magic for pH, but
you can hook me up then.
I could hook you up. Magic for pH, but the potassium after a few months just go way too high, so I quit dosing at like dangerous levels. Where I had to like do 50, 60 gallon water changes to knock it back down.
How high did it get? Like 500?
I gotta look at my ICP. I feel like I was at like 550 or something. Or I remember Chris from ACI. I don't know if it was 580 or 560 or 650, whatever it was, but he's like, you're getting close. He's like, do a big water change. I'm like, shit. So I panicked, did a big massive one just to knock it back down.
Yep. Yeah, but you said some things looked more vibrant when it was higher.
Yeah. So
interesting. Okay.
Too high could be like death zone bad, but elevated levels, I actually did feel like the tank felt a lot more vibrant and things looked happy.
Yeah.
And pH was magical and life was good, except for the fact that of course your potassium keeps climbing and climbing and climbing. And that's the danger with it.
Well, and that's another thing with, probably my responsibility as somebody that sells and grows coral is that I can't really have my parameters be wildly different than what people's tanks are. It's like just in the same way that I can't have my lighting be wildly different. It's like I feel like I need to, kind of sell a recipe. It's like you're not just selling corals, you're selling your recipe of like how you do it, right? So because I try to give people my time. I answer, people can text me and not that I want a million people texting me, but I help people out. Like I like to shoot the shit with people about the tanks and stuff. So, we're always learning in this hobby. So yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
and well, that's the thing too, right? You want it, when someone buys a coral, you want it to look the same when they get it and, be similar in their tanks, not like look amazing.
Totally.
And then a week later it looks completely different. You're like, what the?
Yeah. No, I want it to do well, That's, I want to have success, and I want to have backups too. It's like there's certain people I know, if I'm sending them a piece, I'm like, okay, this is kind of like, we've got our reefers code, right? It's the reefers code of certain people. You're going to get a piece back if you ever need it or whatever. So, it's cool.
Yeah, it is. That's a very wise strategy too. If you have a good reefing buddy, like it's good to just trade frags, and then you always have a backup piece if you lose it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, it doesn't have to be about the price of the frag or anything. It's just more
tradesies.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like not really worth anything. The actual material value of a little piece of acropora is,
I know.
Almost nothing.
Oh, it's funny. That was a good one. All right. So if anyone hasn't heard of you before, fraggarage.ca, absolutely amazing corals. If you're in Canada, definitely check it out, because you're a master of growing the acros, and all your corals there look amazing. As I scroll through it, I just want them all. It's a very dangerous site, so you've been pre-warned. If you go on there, you're going to want it all, but definitely check it out.
Yeah.
And it is linked in the description, so easy to find. So I appreciate you coming on today. It's been...
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been fun. Yeah. Just having a beer, being a couple reef dudes,
Love it. I'm going to lure you on in a few months once you've dabbled more with some of the trace and ICPs, and we'll compare some notes. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. Sounds good. Totally.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. Is there any final things, or I think that's probably good.
Yeah, I think I answered all the questions I had on there. Quick shout out, Shelly, Tracy, Melanie, Valhalla. Thank you guys for the super chats. Much appreciated. Give Adam some love. Definitely check out his page, and some really awesome stuff on there. Tons of knowledge, obviously. If you guys enjoyed it, as always, hit the like button. Check out the link in the description, and I'll catch you guys on the live stream.
Thanks, man.